So, yeah, so this talk was by me and also by Dale Leckie. Most of you have heard of Dale Leckie. Those books sitting over there are written by him. And he's a kind of friend of mine, and well, not kind of a friend, he's a friend. And, and so I helped him sell his books. I've written a couple of articles with him, okay, on various things, including the some of the geology and stuff going on at the Big Hill Spring Provincial Park, just outside of Cochrane. And he and I have collaborated on a paper there. And so I decided to do an article about these sand dunes because they're really interesting. We were there about 4 years ago, and they kind of blew me away when we saw them. And so I thought, well, why don't I give a talk about it? So the Great Sand Hills, southwest Saskatchewan, among the largest and active sand dunes in Canada. Right. Okay, so I'm talking about this area over here, this great, the little village of Scepter is over here, and then I think I'm going to need a little more room here so I can. But anyways, and so here's the border between Saskatchewan and Alberta, and here's Empress. Okay, this is the South Saskatchewan River, and then the sand is shown in brown, and so you can see that this is the Great Sand Hills Ecological Reserve. Okay. And there's an interpretive center right over here, just south of Scepter, okay, about 20 kilometers south of Scepter. But in a way, this is kind of an illusion because it looks like you think that this is all sand dunes, and it is all sand dunes, but a lot of it is covered by vegetation. It's primarily covered by vegetation. So they're sand hills, which would be dunes, but they're covered by vegetation, and where they're exposed is quite limited. About 1% of it is covered, and I'll get more into that. So North America was glaciated to varying extent for the last 2.6 million years, and it became finally ice-free maybe 13, maybe 12,000 years ago. So that was really recent in geological time. It's like a blink of an eye. As the ice melted, glacial lakes formed. And as much as 20% of the prairies was covered by these pro-glacial lakes as the ice retreated. And then you had powerful winds rework the sediments into sand dunes, okay? And so some of this stuff has been taken from Dale's books, which incidentally I'm selling at $30 a copy, the same as what you pay in the store. And so some of the stuff is from what Dale, and other stuff I've gotten from the literature. So that sets the frame. And so again, so here's Grand Prairie, here's Edmonton, Red Deer, Calgary, and I'll be primarily talking about this area over here, which is the Great Sand Hills over here. And here's Prince Albert. And so these are glacial lake sediments, which according to the people who've done the work of it. And so these glacial lakes were extensive. And you can see that they covered maybe, I don't know, 30% of the area. And how do they know about them? Because they're primarily covered by vegetation. So they've been mapped out probably in the base of road cuts and some surface work, maybe even some information from oil well drilling. And so at any rate, so this shows the extent of the glacial lake sediments. And then that leads to the sand dunes. And again, this is from the Saskatchewan Energy and Mines Department. And so again, Edmonton, Red Deer, Calgary. And so this shows the actual sand dune as opposed to just not being sand dunes. And I'll kind of get more into that. But again, so here's Saskatoon, Prince Albert, Lloydminster, and this is where the Great Sand Hills are located. And Swiftcurrent, Saskatchewan is right over here. And the border is right here, Lloydminster. So this is the area of sand dunes. And of course, I'm going to be focused on this area over here. Because over here, those are the second biggest sand dunes in Saskatchewan. And they're among the biggest sand dunes in Canada. By the way, if anybody wants this PowerPoint, you're welcome to have it. So if you miss something, but you want to have a copy of it, I mean, clearly there's nothing confidential in this. So you're more than welcome to have it. So this is from the ministry, it's called GeoExplore Saskatchewan. So that's where I got that from. And this shows this is the ice, okay, as it was about to retreat. And so you had about a mile of ice out here, okay, so really ice. And then it started to melt. And of course, nobody quite knows what triggered that melt. Why did suddenly the glaciers decide to retreat? starting about 18,000 years ago, 18, 17, 16,000 years ago. I think that's still a big question. There's still so much we don't know about the environment, right? Our climate. There's lots of stuff we don't know about our climate. But anyway, so here's the ice that starts to melt, and this would be a pro-glacial lake over here. Here's the shoreline. And then you'd have, some kind of an outmarsh over here, little kettle lakes over here, and moraines here, and and this, of course, is all the glacial, we call it till, where we lump all the glacial sediments, we call it till. So that kind of sets the stage. But the part we're really focused on is the lake over here. The lakes would have been really sand rich. And they would have been primarily sediments which form the dunes. Again, so this is the formation of the glacial lakes. Again, focus on this area over here. Once the lakes drain, you get these strong winds which have formed these sand dunes from the drained lake sediments. So the lakes are gone. Again, the focus area over here is primarily this. This would have been really the lacustrine, or the lake deposits over here. Sand dunes and kind of former delta. Again, here's the glacial till over here. Interestingly enough, here's a meltwater channel. And of course, you see these meltwater channels all over the prairies. And again, if you go just as an example, you just go north of Cochrane, you get this splendid, huge meltwater channel. Partly what affected this was just some of the uplift. After a mile of ice melted off, you just also had some glacial rebound, which lifted things up, and then you had downcutting from some of the erosion. This is from a publication. This shows the formation of sand dunes, and it shows different situations. So the blue is wind, and so what you have here is, like in this case, you get the formation of barkens. Well, that's the classification of them. These are barkenoid dunes. You can see, so they're kind of continuous. And I'll show you that's what I've seen at the sand dune. Then these are longitudinal because the wind coming this way or that way. So it makes these are parabolic over here. Okay. So here's the lake, here's the shoreline, here's the dunes. And in this case, you get wind coming from all different directions. And it gives you kind of a star-like geomorphology. And then this is from Leckie. So the way he sees it, is, you got these parabolic dunes with the prevailing winds going this way, pushing the sand in this direction. And then the next step is then, okay, the same thing, prevailing winds. And the way I kind of interpret that is again, here's the sand dunes over here. You got a really sharp drop over here, really sharp slope. So probably the rainwater, because rainwater is going to collect over here. So you have trees over here, and then here it's going to be drier, windier, and you have grass. No trees, and here you have more trees and vegetation. And so that's part of the geomorphology. So before I start showing the dunes, the Great Sand Hills, they cover an area of about 1,900 square kilometers, which is a big area, like 730 square miles. So that's like 730 townships, it would be sections. So this is an area of contrast with open sand dunes, grasslands, juniper and shrubland, saline lakes, wetlands, pebble plains, cottonwood groves, aspen. So, and then the dunes are fairly low relief. They're only about 15 meters. They're 50 feet. Okay, it's like a 5-story building. Okay, so still it's relatively high above the surrounding plain. But it's very rugged out there, and it's because some of these sand dunes they coalesce and real close together. But of this area, only about 1% is exposed. It's about 19 square kilometers or 7 square miles, and the rest is covered by vegetation. It's not extensive in terms of the open sand area. So to start, you're probably saying, when is the guy going to start talking about the dunes? So this is from a painting by Dean Francis from the Leckie book, and again, it shows, so these are the sand dunes, but there's no sand over here because it's covered by vegetation. But the vegetation here, I've seen it, it's only about a couple of inches of soil. And so in terms of binding, it is just limited, right? And because it's very arid over here, it's very, very dry. And so this is just a painting, but now we're going to get down to the nitty gritty. This is the parking lot. When you go to the park, okay, so this is the park, and we got some signs explaining, it's like an interpretive center. And again, these are the sand dunes, but you see no sand because it's covered by vegetation. And so, but if you were to kick that soil with your boot, you remove the soil immediately, then you get sand exposed beneath it. So this is the interpretive center. It's just south of the village of Sceptre, which has been around for over 100 years. So Sceptre, Saskatchewan. And then as you get there, they call this the Great Sand Hills Ecological Reserve. And it's a representative area established to preserve the ecological resources and distinct geological features and to provide opportunities for scientific research. So it's more than a geological place, it's also environmental. So this is going into it, okay? So you can see you get a sand road over here, and you don't need a four-wheel drive, but if you're idiots and you decide you're going to drive off into this area over here, you're going to get stuck in the sand big time. So you don't need a four-wheel drive. You can go in there with a sedan, but you want to stay on the road because it's all sand. And we were here in October, and so this is getting into the sand dunes over here. And again, very sparse vegetation over here, and you can start seeing some of these sand features. So then again, we're kind of getting into it. This on the sand dunes. These are people for scale. Some people walking across. And again, you can see it's very arid. Of course, it's October. This is on the edge of one of the sand dunes over here. And so what you can see is it's a need for scale. And again, here's all the sand over here. But the slope is extremely steep, okay? You know, so I think it'd be running close to maybe 40 degrees. And again, a function of the wind. It's a very windy place. You get lots and lots of steady wind blowing out here. And I think this are footsteps. Might have been somebody came, slid down, and these are footsteps. I think there's somebody coming through there. And so this is my better half over here, who I drag out to all these kind of places. And she loves going out here because she's a birder, and you can see all sorts of birds and wildlife, not all sorts, but you know. And I'll be getting, but you can see this little sheep like over here. And again, so this is, again, I can't explain exactly why, but this is totally natural. So you can see there's these sheets over here, and then over here, well, it's a whole different story. And you know, so here it's all kind of this way and this way over here. So it's got to be a function of the wind, I guess. You know, I'm just giving you an overview. I'm not an expert on sand dunes. So this is standing down, looking up. And this is when you're down, up, looking down. So this is on the very edge of the sand dune, and you can see the direction that the sand flows. If you ever go out here, take your kids out here, you have a great time just jumping off, you know, and sliding down. It's not dangerous, except you get sand all over you in your pants, underwear, and shoes. So at any rate, so these are sand, and this is, I think, they're barkans, but because they go like this continuous, they'd be described as barkanoids, so big barkanoid dunes, as opposed to barkans themselves. You can see it's a fabulous landscape. This is being on top there. It's almost like you're in Saudi Arabia, like out in the desert, or Namibia, except of course you're in Saskatchewan. But again, you can see it's an amazing topography. I think it's very limited in terms of visiting people. Not a lot of people have been there, to the best of my knowledge. How many people here have been there? Yeah, so we got we got 30 people here, and 2 people have been there. So now a little bit about the soil. There's a layer of soil here. You can see it's really thin. And so here's my geological hammer for scale. And you know, you see a little bit of grass, but the actual soil would be like a couple of centimeters. If climate change keeps happening, keeps hotter, gets drier, like last summer was very, very dry, right? Then you have less vegetation and more sand is going to be exposed. So which of course is going to lead to more desertification. This land will be less productive for cattle and whatnot because it's all going to be turning into sand dunes. This is the soil, and this again is the sand. This is all that glacial sand. So the importance, I'm almost finished, the importance of the overland sand. So 1% of the sand hills is exposed sand. 99% of this area is covered with vegetation, and which binds the sand. These are thin and fragile soils. They're very susceptible to wind erosion, which then exposes the underlying sands. So in the area of the Great Sand Hills, climate change is resulting in higher temperatures, less moisture, so more sand will be exposed, more desertification, and less agriculture. agricultural production. And of course, the agricultural part is mainly beef, it's cattle. This is a cattle country. And this is a layer of soil. You can see just a little bit over here, and then it's all 100% sand beneath it. A very important issue. And before I finish, the Great Sandhills are not the largest sand dunes in Saskatchewan. The Athabasca sand dunes are the largest active sand surface in Canada. They stretch for about 100 kilometers along the south shore of Lake Athabasca. And they're about 100 feet in height, some of them. And these dunes are the world's most northerly active sand dunes. They occur right over here along the south shore of Lake Athabasca. We were looking at this area over here, but very quickly. So they extend about 100 kilometers south over here. And this is what they look like. This taken from the literature. But again, so here's Lake Athabasca over here. This is all sand. This looks like some kind of bay associated with the lake. Maybe. It really would be worth a visit, but there's no roads out there, so you have to get in by float plane. Okay, that's or maybe lake by boat. But so these are the largest sand dunes, active sand dunes in Canada, and amongst the most northerly active sand dunes in the world. So to finish off, I call this Go Explore Saskatchewan. The Great Sand Hills is a fascinating area in terms of geology, sedimentology, environment, and of course, vegetation, birds, wildlife. And if you ever want to go on a road trip to Saskatchewan, you could do a loop. You go spend a couple of days in Saskatoon. Saskatoon's a beautiful city, right on the river. Regina, not quite as nice, but it's and then you include the Sandhills. So it'd make for a really nice about 4 or 5 day road trip. That would be my recommendation. That's it. Thank you very much. Any questions?
So what happened to all the water? It's the lake.
Yeah.
It gradually just flows away. And then more and more sand is exposed to wind to make the dunes, to shape the dunes.
Yeah.
Many years on. What happened with, because I'm thinking of the fragile top of soil, if you've got a lot of large animals, large herds on top of them, how badly would that have chewed up the soil, or would it have refreshed the soil with buffalo food, or mammoth, or any of the megafaunas? Because it's all within that same timeline, isn't it?
Right. Yeah, I don't know. These herds of buffalo were immense, right?
Yeah.
And Corey talked about it. They could really chew up the soil, expose a lot of sand. But you're right; they're also eating grass like crazy, and excreting.
Wouldn't be as attractive.
No. Just even in the spring, like still not enough vegetation to bother with, or
depending on the side of the herd you're talking about. You're talking like thousands of individuals. It's a very You're like, no, I'm just gonna go over this way instead of more grass and less things.
so when you're looking for the dunes, but the dunes are covered in vegetation, so they don't look sandy. You are more or less looking for shape or grass on one side, trees on the other. You're looking for the markers that are saying underneath the sand.
Well, it just takes a little bit of a road cut that exposed a lot of the sand. Stream cuts, road cuts, stream cuts, maybe a little information from water wells that have been drilled. Okay, which with that information all turned into the government. Between that and it would give you a pretty good idea of the distribution of the sand. So I think, and that's what those maps were based on.
So at one time, was it ever used as a quarry for building sand, for sand and gravel?
Yeah, sure. Because when you drive through these areas, there's places where they are quarrying sand for road building. For sure, yes. There's industrial use for it.
So way back when they were, I guess, making all these official maps, especially not only provincially, but mainly through the geological survey. Well, even for farming. Well, anyways, so they did a lot of aerial photography. So you can delineate quite a bit of the geomorphological structure.
Good point. The way
the old way of doing things or mapping, it's merits.
The Alberta Geological Survey would have been involved with it. The equivalent in Saskatchewan, right. Aerial photography and all this sort of.
Thank you very much.
Yep. Okay. Sure.